It is an honor to welcome to you to this deeply thought-provoking session titled Unveiling the Silent Voices, Reimagining Indian Mythology Through the Eyes of its Women. Today, we are privileged to have two remarkable authors who have redefined the art of storytelling by bringing women's perspectives to the forefront of Indian culture. First, we have Kavita Kane, a trailblazer in modern Indian writing and a best-selling author published by Rupa Publications. Kavita's 8 novels have carved a unique space in mythology by spotlighting lesser-known women. With a background in journalism, Kavita transitioned from her role as assistant editor at the Times of India to becoming a full-time writer whose feminist reimaginings of mythology are nothing short of revolutionary. Joining her is the accomplished Mona Verma, a literary luminary whose 9 books, recognized by the British Routledge encyclopedias, have been the subject of academic research and ICSE English language teaching series. An alumna of Lady Shri Ram College and Harvard Business School, Mona's work extend beyond writing. She is a leadership skills facilitator, co-owner of Disha, and a champion of women's empowerment. Recipient of numerous honors, including the Rex Karamveer Award, Uttarakhand Ratan, and Hindustan Times Women of the Year, Mona has made an indelible mark in the areas of literature and leadership. These two incredible women bring a wealth of insight, creativity, and passion to today's conversation, which promises to unravel the silent yet powerful voices of mythology's women. Let's give them a warm round of applause, and we begin this enriching discussion.
Yeah. So, good evening. So it is a proud privilege for me to be in conversation with a literary stalwart, Kavita Kane. Kavita's work is much respected and lapped up the moment it is published. And it is a great opportunity for anyone and everybody in the hall to be listening to her and getting to know her perspective. We all read about the books that the writers write, but to get to know their perspective is understanding their work at a completely different platform. So welcome, Kavita.
Hello everyone, good evening. And I think it is a good evening because I think there's a chill in the air also now.
So shall we begin with
Sure.
a tete-a-tete?
Sure.
Right? So Kavita began her career as a journalist. And as we know that journalists have a panache for hard facts. Everything comes with a logic and after a whole lot of research. Whereas her books are all about mythology, and mythology deploys imagination and fillers in a long way. So Kavita, tell us about your journey from journalism to mythology and why this particular field.
I think I was so fed up with facts, as you say. There was so much data, and being a journalist, the first thing they teach you to is state facts.
Yes.
So when I decided to write, I said I will not write about facts. In the sense, I will write fiction. I definitely was not interested in non-fiction because most journalists end up writing non-fiction. And I think that was my first attempt at creative writing because I think besides essays in school, I had not written anything. So I think it was more of a personal test. Okay, because as they say, every journalist wants to write a book. And I thought, this was sort of a personal test for me. Okay, can I write a book? Can I write a novel? Now you will ask me, why mythology?
Why mythology?
Because I think when I was studying literature, what I did understand was the power of mythology, that it is a literary technique. It is actually a weapon. It's sort of where the author wields it to express his thoughts or whatever. So I said, okay, and we are so fortunate to have such a we are full of rich stories. And I think I give full credit to Amar Chitra Katha here because I think When I say, even now when I think of mythology, I remember Amma Chitrakatha.
Yes.
I mean, how they filled our mind,
First
childhood.
brush with mythology.
Yes, mythology, even history. I mean, if you actually say what made history more interesting was because of, and these stories which are, you know, sort of you live with them, they sort of very palpable because we don't realize it. We are one of the few lucky civilizations where we have a living mythology. It's not like Greek mythology which has become part of academia now. You know, it's all here we can right from our names, right from our rituals which we take, you know, the traditions which we take for granted. You see the temples, you see the music, you see literature, you see it's all seeped in our stories, all the stories of Purans or the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. So I think it's a part of our existence, a part of our lifestyle, a part of our culture. And I said, why not this? Why not mythology? And then I chose the most gorgeous character called Karna, because I think besides being one of the most popular characters, I think he is what you say in the Greek sense, tragedy, that he is a tragic character.
Of course.
Completely, with a tragic flaw. Which, by the way, we don't realize that Karna also had a tragic flaw. This whole thing of he being the victim. So I think he fascinated me completely. But I wanted to see him through a woman's eyes. So that's how Karna's wife came about, and jumped from journalism, from facts to fiction.
And thank God for that, because we got to read all those brilliant books, and they all are available downstairs. Do pick them up. So, you know, coming to Karna, you've spoken about Karna's wife Uravi, and even you've written about Urmila. Do you take it upon yourself as a woman that these are those lesser known characters and also victimized to an extent that you must unmute their voices as a woman?
Definitely, because I think when we're talking about, let's say, Urmila, we know about Sita, we know about Draupadi because they are the female protagonists of both the epics. But you'll be surprised to know that there are equal number of women as many men in our epics. And they're not just being populated, you know, ki hai, characters hai. Each character has a reason to be there, however small. So, and we tend to we overlook the women character, you know. Can you ever imagine a Mahabharata without a Kunti or a Gandhari or a Satyavati? But how much of Satyavati do we know? So that's how
she was a real politic.
Yes, she was. I think she was one woman who was literally, I mean, she wielded a lot of political power. She was the most powerful woman in the...
And I think it started with her instead of Draupadi. It started with her.
Yes, that whole, I mean, kya kehte hai, drama jo kehte hain, I think it is because the drama happened actually when she entered.
Yes.
So that's how the Fisher Queen's dynasty came about. You know, this whole clash and conflict about the royal blood, the Kuru blood, and the whole irony of it that it was not just Kuru blood, it was her blood. It was the from a fisherwoman. So the whole, I mean, and this is true with all the characters, all women characters. If you see, they are small, Surpanaka, all the characters I've written, Urmila, Menka, Tara, the latest one, Tara. So I think they are there, we are very familiar with them, but we don't seem to know their stories at all. Like for Tara, I remember many of them didn't even know who Tara was.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And the people were getting confused with Taramati and all. I said, no, Taramati nahi, ye Tara hai. So, and Tara, interestingly, there are two Taras and both have very interesting stories. So I tried to weave both their stories together to make very absolutely different parallels. They are parallels, but they are completely disparate stories, but very, very effective. So this Tara, we know about, if we know about her, well and good, but otherwise, again, a very small character, but she is the reason why that entire politics of Kishkind happens. We don't know much. I mean, we know about Sugriva and Hanuman, but what happened? This whole thing about Sugriva and Vali, and why did brothers who loved each other suddenly become the worst enemy, the most mortal enemy? And again, as you say, a typical sexist way, it was because of a woman. The war happens because of a woman. Everything happens because of a woman. This whole thing, the burden of responsibility of the accusations and the allegations is on the woman. So I think Tara is one such character who is one brother's wife and she becomes the other brother's after being a widow. Yeah. So I think, and which is a very common thing in our culture, even now. In some, so definitely some sections of our country, it's still happening. So I think these characters are very much there. I mean, when we are talking about Urmila, we know about Sita, but who knows about what?
And the biggest sacrifice.
Yes, we don't know about Urmila. I mean, Urmila, all the 4 sisters actually. If you, each one had a similar, what do you say, experience. Like they had married the 4 brothers, they had the same experience, but each one of them reacted differently. And that is the beauty of it, because no character is predictable. No character is repeated. I think so. This amazing tapestry, both in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, is that there are so many, as I said, populated with lots of characters, women characters especially, very small, very intense, very complex. So I think Urmila is one of the most, she's the most neglected character. I mean, we just, oh yeah, I mean, her 14 years, what she did. We know what, of course, it's Sita's story. Yes, we know Sita's story, the story, Ramayana is the story of Ram and Sita. But what is the parallel? Like she is holding fort in Ayodhya. What happened in Ayodhya? So that was the reason. So all these smaller characters are, let's say, main characters. So I mean, they are all 8 characters. If I start talking about all 8 of them, it becomes too much. I mean, coming back to your point is that I think the importance of minor marginalized characters, because they are a reason they are there in the narrative. They are the reasons the plot moves forward. You don't realize, because you remove a Surpanaka from the scene, you remove an Ahilya from the scene, you will find suddenly you will voids there.
In the story. The story can't even move forward.
Yes, because because Ahilya's story is kept recurring. People are reminded every time. You remember Ahilya, what happened to Ahilya, it won't happen to you. So she sort of becomes a warning. She's a symbol of literally, women's infidelity, a sort of a warning to brides. So this is what you will pay for if you do not do that. So I think it's very, very, what would I say, a lot of socio-cultural ethos also in this, where it gets the definition of what the characters were and what they got twisted into is also another issue. It's a different story altogether.
That's a wonderful answer. And that also reminds me of the fact that, earlier, the proponents of law and religion were all men. So they were writing stories, or they were writing the narratives, but only from their own point of view. And even the kind of acts or plays that were performed had very little parts for women, and those parts were also played by men. Right, so women actually could not ever voice what their inner dilemma was. And that is why it takes writers like Kavita to unmute their voices and for us to understand what exactly the Ramayana was all about. It was not just a story of Ram and Sita, it was also, it's like Mahabharata, right? So the battle is not between the Pandav and Kaurav, the battle was between the backstories.
Yeah, the story of Mahabharata in fact is so far-reaching, but you actually, when you go, forget far-reaching, you have to really unravel the story. Because as I said, when I talk about Satyavati, this whole thing about Satyavati and Bhishma, you know what, it's very ironical, that family where which ended up in such a bloody war where the cousins are at each other's throat and they killed each other. They were the same family where one brother gave up the throne for the other. Like Bhishma's, his father, Shantanu had an elder brother. He had given up. So it was a history. They had a legacy of absolute generosity where there is no, you do not covet power and the throne. And the irony is that this is what happens to the same family.
Yeah.
So why does it happen? Because of circumstances, because of situation, because of certain decisions of people. So which is equally, the blame goes equally on Satyavati and Bhishma, I think so, because they are the ones who actually start the entire, the waves which are going to crash on.
Yes. And actually, even the presence of Shikhandi or Shikhandini
Yes.
in the battlefield is all a backstory of Amba and Ambalika.
Completely. If you actually see Satyavati and Bhishma are the architects of
The bold and
architects of the Mahabharata. They are without them. And earlier on, if you actually see Devyani and Yayati, so and the thing is, we do not know much about that part of Mahabharata at all. We know Mahabharata, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and Draupadi.
And the reference.
And that is actually 1/3. That is just 1/3 of the entire narrative. But the first half, more than the half, is much more interesting, and I think completely overlooked again.
So also while writing historical fiction or writing mythology, many historians and writers, they must reconstruct the past. But for reconstructing the past, they have rather more resources which are also whatever was permitted by the ruling regime or the rulers at that particular time, and also sometimes very scant information. So how do you reconstruct the past? How do you fill in the past yourself? What is it that you take care of?
Honestly, since I write about minor characters, there's not much about them per se.
Yes.
So I am completely bank on the major character, like let's say Satyavati, I bank on Bhishma. Though she's there chronologically for a very long time, but there's nothing, she's just sort of an apparition. She's just there, her presence, but she's the one who things are, the dice is rolling there. Or anyone, like let's take so, or whether it's Menka. I think Menka, you don't know anything besides being an Apsara. Because against her is that huge character called Vishwamitra. Now I tried to sort of mold her through Vishwamitra's character. Because, and that's what I've been doing. Urmila was basically Sita's sister, she was Lakshman's wife, she was Janak's daughter. I mean, so sort of whatever facts I have, whatever information I get, and they are pretty random, they are pretty scattered. I try to collate them, try to bring it, make it a rational whole, and try to join the dots and make a believable story. Because see, they are not my stories, they are not my characters. So when I'm building these characters, especially minor characters, the problem is that they are there for a reason, for a certain specific amount of time and space in that narrative, and I am writing an entire novel on them. So of course the fiction is there. The fiction again is, I sort of dramatize the whole thing, but the information is completely on these major characters and the episodes. The episodes which are the incidents which are happening.
Right.
So I think through that there is some sort of a character analysis, assimilation. So it becomes this sort of a skeletal, and then because of these things, the other information I get from other characters and the fact and the fiction and the dramatization, I sort of build one whole character who otherwise who is in the shadows. You are sort of putting the spotlight on her, and suddenly you see her. Oh, you see her Nurmila, you see her Ahilya, you see her Satyavati or a Tara, and then you see what a Tara means to a Vali or a Sugriv, and what the impact of her in the Ramayana war, the decision she makes, how it impacts. And many people don't even know that she cursed Ram, and how that curse sort of was transferred into the next avatar, and then how Krishna had to suffer it. So it was.
Even parrots cursed Sita. Sita also suffered from the curse of parrots.
Yeah. They in fact, that's one another.
Story in the Puranas.
No, but that is exactly where I think it's really off the.
Yeah, I mean.
But these sort of folklores, I think folklores make it very interesting.
Yes, they do.
There are a lot of these local folklores which make the stories more colorful, more humane, more identifiable. They sort of, we tend to deify a character. These folk stories actually humanize this character. They do. Like they are our stories. You feel they are our stories.
Yeah.
So.
And that is why there are Shrutis and Smritis.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so maybe lots of changes and lots of subjectivity also comes in over there. So Kavita, moving forward, historians and mythology writers face many challenges, including their biases towards certain characters. You may be positively or negatively biased. So how do you maintain the objectivity of the character, the way the character is actually known to people, without letting your biases seep in?
I think that's something I learned from journalism. Ironically, I was writing journalism when it was supposed to be very fair and objective. So, but that's a very it's a very sound technique for an author to view all the characters that way. So I think it's not that I am going to, of course, my protagonist is going to take a lot of space and time, but the other characters are equally important. So the bias, of course, the bias is going to be there because that adds to the slant, the entire subjectivity. Otherwise, I would not say bias, I would say my POV. My point of view is this and I want to argue it out. So like example, for Saraswati's gift, I wanted to argue out the whole point that she is one of the most neglected goddesses. We talk about Durga, we talk about Parvati, we talk about Lakshmi, but we rarely talk about Saraswati. We only remember Saraswati during the time of exams. So I think my bias here was definitely that yes, I owe her a lot and she has not been recognized for what she was. So yes, that passion was there, that whole thing was there, I have to write about Saraswati and show her what she is and what we have not been able to understand about. And so bias, I'll say in a positive way, no, this is going to be there.
No worries. Take it easy, no worries.
Bias is there, definitely, but as long as it doesn't overwhelm me, so much so that it gets colored. So I have this thing, as I said, because of being a journalist, I try to put myself in the shoes of that character, whether it's the protagonist, whether it's the antagonist. Right. So even the smallest of character, I try to, how would she react in that situation? So I think I try to be as fair as I can, and I think
that's how it becomes relatable as well.
Yes, because that is what makes that one character different from the other. It's about us, it's what's happening in our lives. How three sisters react to a certain situation. They might be in the same family, brought up in the same socio-cultural background. So same family values. But see how three sisters react or three brothers react. So it happens. I mean, these are the stories which are just filtered through our experiences. So I think the biases as an author, I would definitely say, I will say in a very positive way, and you need a bias because you need a POV to argue out your point. But I try to be fair to all the characters, and like people ask me, you write only about women. I said, yeah, I write more about women because they are more interesting, and I'm quite sure the men will also agree that women are more interesting than men. But I think my male characters are equally, my male protagonists are equally more fascinating. I think my Lakshman or my Bhishma or Vali or even Brahma. I mean, Brahma was a big challenge. Brahma, and I think Saraswati's gift was the most difficult book for me because we have this whole nebulous idea about Brahma and Saraswati, and for years together I didn't know they were a couple. So it all stemmed from my own ignorance that I didn't know they were a couple. So we have this power couple of Lakshmi Narayan, you have Shiv, Parvati, and hello, where is Brahma and Saraswati? You never see them together. So I think so recreating Brahma and Saraswati.
Kept their affair under wraps.
And not to forget the affair, the whole thing was so volatile, the relationship. I mean, it is actually a clash of the mind. The whole thing was about, I mean, we talk about, I think they were in love, but they just did not agree with each other. The whole thing was, I think that is what they have shown, the creator and his muse, creativity. The whole symbolism of creator and the creativity is this relationship of Brahma and Saraswati. So anyway, that book was really the most difficult to, because we don't even think about Brahma. Brahma is that old hoary figure with his silver hair and three heads, and Saraswati is this gentle lady with sitting on with a white sari, nothing beyond that. And then we'll say the Saraswati Stotra, and that's about it. What does she signify? She is the goddess of learning, she is the goddess of music, she is the goddess of knowledge, she is the goddess of everything. I mean, the basics, how you think. So I think when we are talking about this whole fact and fiction, we are trying to added that fact where a river Saraswati disappeared. What if the goddess Saraswati actually disappears from earth? What will happen to us? Where man is without knowledge.
Oh yes.
So I think that was sort of
that calls for an applause.
That was
what
a
dystopian. That is.
No, that was a very dystopian idea, but it was happening because I wrote that book during the COVID times, and things were at the bleakest. So I think, and I could see that the whole mankind, like humankind was brought to its knees in those 2 years. And if Saraswati, if our knowledge, whatever we know, we have a lot of information. We have knowledge, but we don't have wisdom. For all these centuries, for the mankind and humankind has just not been able to learn from their lesson. So there is war and violence and bloodshed and hate and jealousy. Nothing has changed. So what is the use of that information? What is the use of the knowledge when you cannot make good use of it?
Bilkul, absolutely.
So I think that was the bias. Now I'll say that was the bias definitely where we are writing about Saraswati.
So talking about Saraswati, and also because the characters have been picked up from Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and they have a religious standing, these characters over there. So one has to treat very cautiously, while writing about characters which are worshipped as well. So is there a no-go area, something that you refrain from when you're writing about them?
That's why I said she was the most difficult character also, because it was the first time I was writing about a goddess as a protagonist. Because I think, no, I think here I'll no-go, there's no no-go, because I think I respect my readers. They know exactly what I'm trying to say, and I think they have reacted sensibly enough. So let's talk about Saraswati. If I'm writing about a controversial goddess like Saraswati, who did not believe in marriage, who did not believe in motherhood. I mean, these are the pillars of women's thought and position in our society, and she was everything but that. But I think the book, people took very well to that book, and I think I would definitely say I did justice to Saraswati, what I wanted to show, and I think the readers also did that. They were able to gauge what I was trying to say. That entire, because after a point it becomes very philosophical also, because she's knowledge. There's a lot of, I won't go into the spiritualism, but definitely there's a lot of philosophy behind the whole concept of Brahma, creation, creativity. So I'm trying to translate them, trying to put it in simpler words, and talking about a goddess and the controversial relationship she has had with not only with Brahma, with other gods
as well.
And I think it keeps happening. I think, but whichever instances which I don't think that I have ever sort of stopped myself and restrained myself and said, no, I will not write because I'm scared of the people's reaction. Because I think we sort of underestimate our people, our public, our readers. I think they know the difference between fact, fiction, falsity, sensationalism. I think they do know that, because beyond a point, if I am talking about a goddess, and that is the beauty of all our stories, because our goddess and gods are so humanized. So we are talking about an entire story of humans, of mortals, of apsaras and gandharvas. When they are not the stories of gods and goddesses and apsaras and gandharvas, they are the stories of us. It's about human follies, about man, his faults, his folly, his fallacies, whatever. They are all our stories. So we have tried to sort of say it in the form of, let's say, gods, like Indra. Indra, I think, is the most reviled, or rather the most flawed god, I could say.
Yes.
So, but we love hammering him. It's like saying that, okay, chalo Indra. But then I think creating the character of Indra in Ahilya's story was very pivotal, because I think he has been maligned a lot. But also what he stands for. What does a man of immense beauty and wealth and power, when he becomes insecure, what happens to him?
What happens, yeah.
Which is so much. I mean, you see men who are vain, and what happens to them?
So many
men who have power, who have everything. And you say, why is he behaving like that? Because of this. That is there in Ravan also. I mean, when you actually see, these are flaws of powerful people, where insecurity eat into them, and actually you can see literally the way the cookie crumbles. No, they are their own
like
enemies.
their imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Almost.
The whole thing is trying to humanize an Indra or a Saraswati or a Brahma. I mean, these are the three gods I can talk about. Or even Ram. I mean, Ram, I did it in Tara. As I said, Tara's curse. I mean, where you see Ram with where he might have erred, he might have taken a certain decision which devastated Tara's life. and why? Was he really being fair? So I think this whole argument is out, and I've argued it both ways. I mean, and I think the readers loved it. In the sense, the readers understood it more than loved it. I think they understood what I was trying to say and what the situation was. I think that's what Valmiki was trying to say himself.
Right.
That when you say Maryada Purushottam, we forget the Maryada part of the Purushottam. You know, we have deified him. We have made him God, but he was a man with his flaws.
Yeah, that's why he's called Purushottam, the Purush, Uttam Purush.
But
not God.
the thing out here is, here we are talking about an ideal man. It was not about an ideal man at all. It was the concept of an ideal king. He was not supposed to be an ideal man. He was not supposed to be an ideal husband. He was supposed to be an ideal king. He was talking about literally like euphoria, utopia rather, where it was the perfect state, political state, with a perfect king. Now here the question remains, when you are talking about a perfect king and a perfect state, what about the perfect public? Is the public perfect enough? A public which is so judgmental about sensing and character assassinating the queen, about Sita. I mean, who is the main culprit? Is the public.
It's a public.
He reacts because there is a certain public reaction. So here actually what Valmiki was, the whole, I mean, we thought, this is all between the lines. Here we are talking about a perfect political state, perfect king and a perfect queen. But the public is not perfect. So I think
Like when Plato wrote the Republic and he spoke about the perfect ruler, he also spoke about the perfect society.
Yes,
and
that
that is
was
why it
that-
was called the utopian society. So also, one thing I want to ask you, there's so many young people seated over here in Generation Z+. How do you ensure that mythology becomes a compelling read for Generation Z and beyond? What are the steps that you...
I think I don't have to make any. I think the story then interesting. I think they're innately very interesting. They have not been. I think what is happening with our stories is that it is just one set of stories which are being repeated. Like earlier, at least there were grandmothers to tell the story. Now there are no grandmothers telling the stories. So we are sort of completely dependent on the reels and social media and TV serials, obnoxious TV serials, which have completely
Out of line.
assassinated the entire concept of, I mean, it's very sad. I mean, they just don't seem to be able to grasp the beauty and the depth of these stories and trying to put them in a powerful medium like television. Nevertheless, I think what has happened, I think there is a lot of curiosity. There is a huge void and they want to know those answers. They want to know more. It's not just beyond Ram and Sita and Draupadi and the Pandavas. They want to know about a Kunti. They want to know about a Gandhari. They want to know about Bhanumati also, Duryodhana's wife. So I think this curiosity, there's a lot of hunger in fact. I personally...
Even Arshi, Shakuni's wife,
Yes.
was again a very strong character.
Shakuni, I mean, all of them. I mean, even you see Vidu's character. I mean, so there is a lot of, they want to know more. There's a lot of hunger. In fact, I don't think what is happening, like even this TV serial, they're showing the same Mahabharata over and over again. I mean, come up with some political debate, which they encourage. Come up with a cultural debate. Come up with a social debate, which they were talking about topics which are so relevant today. We can still talk about them, translate it into our real lives and argue about it, but we are not doing it. And I think that is the advantage the book readers have, because I think they have managed to assimilate this fact, and the TV audience, I think, has been dismissed as completely below average, and we have the same drama, Saas Bahu thing happening over and over. I mean, even if you see all the serials, you will always see Lakshmi and Saraswati fighting. They'll always show women fighting against each other. This is, I think, the most erroneous and most damaging narrative which has been told. I mean, we have this whole concept of sisterhood, it is very much a fact of Ramayana. We talk about the four set of brothers. We have the four princes in Ayodhya. We have Vali and Sugriv in Kishkin.
Right.
We have these three brothers in in Lanka.
Right.
We are talking only about brothers here. But the story of sisterhood in the Ramayana is the fact that Sita was from Videha, which was completely different from Kosala. Ideologically and philosophically, it was very different, where the king did not yearn to have a son. A king was happy to have a daughter. He adopts another daughter, and he has 2 nieces. So this whole world, Videha, is a city of women. I mean, it is a city which respects women. When you see Janak, I think Janak was the first feminist, actually, in the epics. If you see,
Very well said. Very, very well said.
and what the Videha and see it against Ayodhya, so, and against Kosala, what the 4, where obedience is the last thing. In the last word, you have to obey. So I think Valmiki was trying to talk about sisterhood also, because it's not only about these 4 sisters. It's also about when Sita travels, when she goes to exile. See the women she meets. Every woman helps her. Whether it's the Rishi's wife, whether it is when she's imprisoned, whether it's Mandodari in her own way, So see, the women support other. They did support other, and here we have been constantly showing. See, Surpanaka is there. She is the vamp, so she was again. This whole thing of women against women narrative is completely wrong. And you keep, like when I was doing the research on Saraswati, constantly stories about Lakshmi and Saraswati fighting. Why? No, it cannot happen. I mean, we are talking about power is under a woman, wealth is under a woman, and wisdom is again ruled by a woman. So where does the conflict start? We cannot have, when you are talking about Tridev, they are also the three Devis. So this whole thing, women have to, the women supporting women or women for women, women helping women, I think sisterhood is a part of these stories which have been completely buried in the heft of patriarchy bolo, sexism bolo, kuch bhi misogyny bolo, but it has been completely distorted. We don't even see Ramayana as a story of women at all. Of Sita, her sisters, what her legacy, what is her background, and that is how she reacts with other women when whom she meets. So I think I personally believe Ramayana is a beautiful story of sisterhood. It's not just about brotherhood and brothers and bromance, and brotherly love and sacrifice. I think the sisterly sacrifice, I mean, imagine 4 sisters suddenly becoming 4 sisters-in-law, where in their relationship, political intrigue becomes a part of their lives, and how wonderfully and maturely they deal with it. I think we have completely ignored these stories.
And I think, how beautifully you have written and narrated about these characters, this has radically changed the perception of the youth towards these scriptures. Yes. And I think that is the USP of your craft. So much has been written about the characters. She's not the only one. There are so many people. There's no dearth of literature on mythological fiction. But the way Kavita has dealt with it has changed the perception of people towards these epics. And I think this is what her USP is. And this is what makes Kavita Kane.
One last question. Thank you. Those were extremely kind words. But I like to add on this because I think that is what I think that is also the reason why I feel like writing, is because of these blanks and the voids which are there.
Yes.
I think I try to make, there is so much of layered meaning in each of these stories. They are not literal stories. They are not moral stories.
Yes.
There is a lot of psychological and philosophical content which we seem to be missing.
Yeah.
And here we have all these noir thrillers and noir stories from Europe, and this whole darkness, I think both Mahabharata and Ramayana deals with it so beautifully. We just see a black Ravan, and then we see a black Duryodhan. But no, the grays, the darkness, and Mahabharata shows it so beautifully, where each character becomes dark at different situation. And he becomes nice. There is no character who is completely white. Or it's completely.
There are no rasas.
So I think this is what I feel sort of triggers me and eggs me to write the stories, is to show these discrepancies, which we have to understand. We have to appreciate the legacy, which is these rich stories which we have, and I think we are not being able to understand them.
So Kavita, the last question to you. When you wrote your first book versus your latest, Has there been any change in the way you have structured the stories or crafted the characters?
I hope so, because I hope I have matured as an author the past 10 years. I think it's been 10 years since I wrote Karna's Wife. So I think Karna's Wife was a lot of emotion. I never thought I would write so many books. I just thought I'll write one book and go back to work. Fortunately, it was a sleeper hit, and one thing led to the other, and then the other books followed. But yes, I think I think when I'm talking about POV, I think perspective, I hope I become mature enough, because besides the technical aspects and the skills, where I know how to fine tune it now, because how to place the ending, how to place the dialogues or whatever. Besides all that, I think the core, for me, the core reason why I'm writing, let's say the difference between Karna's Wife to today's Tara's, I think it becomes more, I think I am leaning towards, not the darkness as such, but the darkness in humanity. You know, it's like the first two books, there was a certain optimism. Karna's Wife and Sita's Sister, they were good, wholesome, sanskari protagonists, Urvi and Urmila. But I think with Menka, I think I started thinking, because I did not want anyone to say that, oh, this character, you know, her Urmila is like a Tara, you know, something like that. Now, after 8 books down, I don't want anyone to say that this character reminds me of something. Because in reality, they do not. Because they are so drastically different. And I said earlier, they are not my characters, they are borrowed characters. Yes. I cannot really take so much of creative freedom. I personally believe that, because I do not want to warp them in any way. So as an author, definitely I think bring out the grimmer realities of a woman's life. And I think each character, each woman has this story. I think there is a literally a systemic inequality and discrimination happening with women then and now. So if I'm able to relate those stories to today's times and make people realize that what an Ahilya suffered, or what a Sita suffered, or what a Draupadi suffered, or what a Surpanaka also suffered. I think we have a Surpanaka, Menka, Urmila in our living amongst us. All we have to do is sit and recognize them and have an empathy and make an effort to help each other out. Because I think as an author, I honestly believe that we have to tell our own stories. We have to tell our own stories, we have to write our own stories, because who is interested in us but ourselves? We have to, because no one, the men have already told their stories, all the stories. But I don't think there are many men who read women authors or women's stories. So we have to talk about us, our stories, what we feel through. So I think the whole, the Urvi and the Tara, I think there's a lot of difference, because I think what Tara has gone through, it is very internalized. Urvi, we see the drama in Urvi's life, you know, because it's almost like it's what happening in reality, in the sense it is what is happening, is as dramatic as the Kurukshetra war, or the events happening in the Mahabharata. But in a Tara, it's more internalized. In a Ahilya, it's more internalized. In a Saraswati, it's more definitely, there is a lot of quiet rebellion. So I think I'm more interested in that. Okay. I'm more interested in the internal battles of a woman, where she has to, that whole thing of she didn't have a choice. Why didn't she have a choice? Why could she not decide? You know, this power to decide, the power to choose, which I think a man has always had it, and he's privileged. I mean, there the privilege of a man comes out, because so much so that he doesn't even realize it's a privilege. But for everything, a woman has to think before she decides on anything. I think I'm very much interested in that. This power of making a decision.
Because you're not independent till you're not given a choice, right? So that calls for the end of our discussion. And I would say there is one thing which is consistent in all her works, which has not changed right from the first book until now, and all the rasas of human emotions that Kavita has been so lucid and so articulate about in her work, whether it is a Veer Ras, whether it's the Prem, it's a Saundarya, or the Adbhut. Everything is there. Those rasas are all taken care of. The characters have changed, and she has given them an inner voice, which is much needed in today's time, which makes our scriptures richer, thanks to writers like Kavita. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, you may have a flight. Just that is that.
I just wanted to add one quick question that you talked about point of view and you talked about creating your characters. Obviously, you have a lot of study and research. So that research, which are the original texts that you went to or referred to?
The original texts are there.
Yes, yes. So which are
No, the first. See, there are thousands of versions of Ramayana and the Mahabharata. On top of that, there are folklores. As I said, what really affects me, and I sort of make an instant decision, are the folklores. So whether it's Karna's wife, whether it's Lanka's princess, I think Surpanaka was completely based on a folklore, or even Ahilya. So I think folklores are more interesting because No, the language they have everything is digitalized now. Everything has been translated into English. That's not a problem. Research is no longer a problem at all. The problem is sieving the information. Because there's so much of information, sieving it and trying to tell the story, because I end up with so much of matter that trying to condense it in just 300 pages becomes a challenge. So research, there's lots. As I said, there are a lot of versions. I try to stick to the original Valmiki and the Vyas stories, because what happens, the story which is there in the Ramayana changes in the Mahabharata, which is completely different in the Purans. So I have to choose what I want. Like example, especially stories like Ahilya's stories keep changing. So I choose what I want, and then I have to stick to it. It has to be rational, it has to be believable. Yes, the perspective comes there. What I'm trying to say is that there are 2-3 different stories. Let's say I have 2-3 different stories about Saraswati. What do I want? I have to take a story which I agree with, and I can argue it out. So I think there are a lot of stories sprinkled.
How did you take inspiration from Iravati Karve?
Iravati Karve. But I think she has a flight, so I think we can always discuss it. Iravati Karve, actually her book is a sociological treatise. It is basically that. She's only talking about 2 communities, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. And the Sooth were not some low caste. This whole thing about Sooth being a low caste, no, it is not. So I think if you want to read Iravati Karve, it actually opens the eyes with all this. Yes. I think we can discuss this later. I think she has to leave. So I will, she has a flight to catch. So,
At 8:50.
so thank you everyone for
I'm so sorry,
listening.
you're so apologetic about this.
No, but I have lots of time.
Discussion with ma'am.
But thanks a lot for giving me an opportunity to talk this. And I think most importantly, your questions were absolutely discerning. Very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being so mindful of my timing as well. I have a flight at 8:50 and I have to go to the hotel, pack, and then go to the airport. So I'm sorry to...
Now you scram.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you next sessions tomorrow. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you, ladies. It was an enthralling session. Thank you.